I don't want to waste anybody's time here. So, um, so the first thing I wanted to connect about was there was a BLM rally in Charlotte, and the story was put out by the Gateway Pundit just 6 days ago. But there was a rally in Charlotte, and there's a street preacher there that has been there for a long time. His name's Sam, and he was just holding up a sign that says Jesus saves, and he got covered with eggs and all sorts of things and silly string. And then the rioters at one point started chanting F your Jesus
Yeah,
as
I
they
heard
were
about
marching
that.
down. And so just wanting to know, first of all, just like, obviously there's a desire, at least in people's hearts, that want justice and want society to be whole, and for no ethnic groups to be marginalized. But at this point, it seems like some of these BLM rallies are going beyond just the idea of let's elevate Black people and make sure that they matter in our society. What do you guys think? What's the end goal? Why are they going into things like F your Jesus? And Dom, go ahead and start us off.
I see you still being you trying to be I don't want to say politically correct, but you're trying to be polite, right?
I'm a polite guy, brother.
I feel you, and I respect that. But I mean, at some point we gotta stop kidding ourselves. And I know that you're more aware. You're just being polite, but it. I'm not really that surprised by it at this point. There's been enough that I've seen that my mind has been made up anyway. I never really was big on the Black Lives Matter movement. I'll tell you a quick story real quick. In 2016, I had an experience with the Black Lives Matter movement when I lived uh, living in South Carolina at the time. And I forget who it was that had just got killed. It might have been Terrence Crutcher, or I forget who it was, but they invited us all to the movement down there invited us to it was like a showing of Fruitvale Station. We was all supposed to sit there in this room and watch this movie and just identify with the experience of him at that time. And it was a sad movie, but I just remember at the end they all like stood up and they started like wanted us to hold hands in a circle and meditate. And it was just, to me, it was really strange. It was really weird. So since then, because I got a text the next day, it was like, oh, we would like to give you a formal invite to join the Black Lives Matter. I'm like, nah, because it just wasn't odd to me. It was just way off. So since then, I always just felt like, and like I said, it was like a room full of mostly white people and maybe like 2 or 3 Black people, but you can tell that they weren't the kind of Black people that live in these environments that are portrayed, in these incidents. You know what I mean? You can just tell. So since then, I knew it was something about at least segments of that movement that weren't entirely genuine. It was just weird to me. But fast forward to now, man, you didn't see so much stuff. They come out as Marxists, they anti-family, anti-God. Like, you know, to me, I'm surprised they ain't say it sooner. So I'm just not my faith, if ever I had any in that movement, is not. So as far as I'm concerned, they're exposed. As far as I'm concerned, you know, it is what it is. I know that I don't support the movement. I don't support the organization. I don't support the lies that they spew. I don't support the Marxism, the socialism, the victim mentality that they push on everybody. I don't support none of it. So I expect them to say more things like that and do more things like that. And I actually think that it's good because it helps people that are on the fence distinguish between who they're and really understand who they're dealing with,
Yeah.
right? Because people like say, "Oh, well, it's not about this." And like, no, they telling you this is who they are. I think my
Yeah,
answer
but
is
Dom,
say who they are, believe them.
hey Dom, do you see a distinction though between like Black Lives Matter, the movement? Because you're talking about both, and like the organization. Because like as far as the organization goes, I definitely agree with you. I think there's a lot of things that are very problematic. I mean, obviously, like with this thing going on, I think there's different things, and I'll talk about that in a second. Like with what happened at this Charlotte rally, but I think the organization definitely has some issues, like you mentioned, being Marxist, kind of against the family and that stuff. It's not like stuff that's randomly being said about them. It's actually what's on their website that they've put out there. But as far as the movement goes, to me, at least for me, and like people that in my community, people that I like care about, it's to me, it's more about like for me, if something it's not Black. I'm professing that, hey, like my friends, even my family members that I have that are Black, like their lives matter. They matter to me, and so like I have no problem supporting the movement. But then it's the organization, like you mentioned, that's definitely problematic. Do you see a distinction between the two, or are you kind of think in your mind they're kind of one and the same?
I see the distinction that people try to create, but
Mm-hmm.
who, like, before the Black Lives Matter, did you think your Black friends didn't matter? Like, did
Well,
you
no, of
think
course not. Yeah.
they were only important once the organization came? Like, my life has mattered my whole life. I've loved my friends and
Yeah,
family my whole
absolutely.
life. I didn't need Trayvon Martin to die for me to care about my community. So, I mean, I think that's the rope, that's the line, that's the bait that they give people. It's like, well, don't you care about Black lives? And so that people
Mm-hmm.
don't feel guilty or feel like they're being called a racist, they capitulate. But really, the organization is what it is. They are the movement. You can't separate the two,
Mm-hmm.
at least not in my mind, because they're the ones pushing that narrative. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I see the distinction that people try to paint, but in reality, the end goal is to get you to support the organization or at least to echo their talking points. So I don't really think there's a real distinction to be made because the
Mm-hmm.
organization is the movement. They started it. It's theirs. It's their baby.
Yeah.
So try to
Yeah.
put a
No,
dress on
I
it.
get I get that. That makes sense. I think that the thing that's tough though, I think that the problem, maybe the line that gets blurry is you have a lot of people that don't distinguish or that don't see or that see they weren't really aware of the BLM organization beforehand, but then obviously got big as the movement picked up big time, especially this year. Because hard for me to see, like, say, for example, my Black friends or people of color that are friends of mine posting about like Black Lives Matter, like, and if I refute that with some of the facts and things that you've said, then it's like, well, hey, that's almost against them. Like, hey, I don't care about them because they're the ones. So it's almost like, hey, yes, this movement might have a meaning, this organization might have a specific meaning, but like my friends, the people that I deeply care about and love, they're posting it for a reason and it means something to them. And so like, who am I? Not just because I'm white, but who am I to say to them like, hey, I don't care about what you're posting or I don't agree with like, but they're really just trying to say, hey, like, I want to let people know that I matter. You know what I mean?
No, I get
So
it. We can be compassionate and people have a right to post or express whatever they want to express.
yeah,
But I'm just saying, as far as me, like I didn't need that
yeah,
movement to tell me that my life was important or that anybody's
yeah,
life was important. Like everybody's lives
absolutely.
matter, but it's
Yeah,
really just it's the narrative. One of the problems I have with Black Lives Matter or saying Black Lives Matter or echoing their talking points is you promote their narrative. That organization has made $1 billion. You know what I mean? And they don't do nothing
yeah,
for Black communities. So
that's fair.
I
Yeah,
get the desire to want to support your friends, but that's just called being a good friend. You don't have to say Black Lives Matter to me to tell me you love me. If you
yeah.
want your friends to know you love them, just tell them you love them.
Or
That's it.
actions. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's good.
That's good. Yeah, Josh, go ahead and speak into the and AJ's on with us now. AJ is Josh,
What's up, AJ?
AJ.
Hey, AJ.
So we're talking about there's a Charlotte BLM rally last week where they went through the streets chanting "F your Jesus," so Josh, go ahead and speak into that.
Yeah, so obviously, like, first off, that hurts. It hurts hearing it. Especially if you're a follower of Jesus, that really hurts. You feel it deeply. I kind of looked into it more when you mentioned this. Hey, these things we're going to be talking about. So obviously I looked at stuff on both sides, trying to see like where's the shred or kernels of truth in here as people talk about their opinions about the things that happened. And I think a lot of what happened was that this guy, the street preacher Sam was, he was, chanting or, yell out loudly saying like, Jesus saves or whatever during their rally. So I think a lot of us on both sides is you have these like this mob mentality on their side. They feel like they're being drowned out by this guy talking about Jesus when they're trying to, ask like, well, hey, it doesn't matter right now. Like we need to promote and shout that Black Lives Matter. And so I think that they took offense to it and then like, trying to clap back like and say, what they said. And it's just foolishness on both sides. I think that, and it is sad that a guy who, actually watching the video and hearing it it wasn't just like one person hearing it being like kind of chanted back, and around. It would definitely hurt. But I think a lot of it's just like aggression and like agitation on both sides. And then anytime you have a mob, this mob mentality happens and you see it everywhere. It's happening in Portland, it's happening in Kenosha, it's happening everywhere, where people aren't thinking, it's a group think, and it's like foolishness, 'Cause I guarantee I hope that if you went and talked to those individual people, I feel like half of them would be like, well, no, I don't really believe that, just got caught up in the moment. So it's sad, it hurts. I think like Dom mentioned, like, yeah, it's not a surprise from the organization if it was, being led by the organization, but just that mob mentality, like things will be said that aren't meant. So while it hurts, at the same time, I don't take it as like, all right, this is a direct offensive and like an aggression towards Christianity. I mean, like Dom mentioned with other things, that's been happening for the past 20, 30 years or longer, in, pop culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
AJ, so based on what Josh just said, do you think that like, so I know AJ, you've gone and you've tried to be out kind of on the street at times.
Yeah.
And is it a sense of trying to agitate or what's the goal there?
I am in the trenches. We're doing, I've been to Portland. I've been downtown Salem, where we are doing Church in the Park. And it is a direct, even when they're not being provoked, it is a direct assault against believers. I've seen it firsthand. And it's all in the name of Black Lives. The event, or Black Lives Matter, the events that we put on, I could just recall just last Sunday we did a multicultural service where a Russian church was there, Spanish church was there, a predominantly Black church was there, predominantly white church was there, and this was advertised. And Black Lives Matter showed up to intentionally let us know fervently that they were against our God and against our movement. They let it be known. They were not provoked. No one said anything to it. They showed up with about 50, 60 people with the intention to interrupt our service, and with the intention to intimidate. That's the word that I'm looking for. And in Portland, the burning of Bibles. You go there. We were trying to witness to some people in Portland at the Sean Foltz. I don't know if you know who he is, but the events that he put on, we were witnessing to people, and it was direct aggression against believers, and they fervently let us know when they showed up with their signs, F your Jesus. They had the satanic signs. I mean, just showing up unprovoked. If you watch a lot of, and again, this is the movement, right? The BLM Inc. The leaders of it, they let you know that they're against anything Christ. And just like there are people, because I have believers, I have friends who support Black Lives Matter, but they don't really understand it. They don't really know what's going on. But just like there's things circulating that they are fervently against Jesus Christ. And that trickles down, you know. It's not just a saying. It's not just, that's why I don't hashtag Black Lives Matter or I don't support any of it, because it is not just a saying. It is empowering this organization to control the thought and the culture. Because if you look at it, what have they really done to help Black people? What have they really done? The marching, the rioting, all this thing, this does not help. You know, they talk about Martin Luther King, but that's not the only thing he did was march. You know, he was affecting society in ways that would bring about change. And so that's why I can't get with the organization, because what you are seeing, and especially here in Oregon, from what I'm seeing, is they are fervently against Jesus Christ. They're fervently against anybody who stands for Jesus Christ. I'm up preaching. I'm Black. I thought my lives matter. Why are you chanting when I'm preaching the gospel right now? Why are you, you know, it's this hypocrisy, because it's not about Black lives. That's not what this organization is about. It's actually about another agenda that they're trying to push, because if they were really trying to affect Black lives, why aren't there programs being put in place? Why isn't there money being poured into inner cities? Why isn't nobody talking about fatherlessness? Why isn't these things being addressed? Why isn't there programs to help single mothers get off of welfare so that they can get married? Come on. I mean, there's a lot of things that are wrong with the Black community that Black Lives Matter is not addressing.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, AJ, because I know you've been down there in the trenches in Portland and Salem. Josh, I appreciate your point, what you're bringing up about, like, if it could be potentially agitating if a guy shows up to a BLM march and he's got a sign that says Jesus saves, and it's kind of like, well, are you going there to pick a fight? But as I did my research on this guy, he's actually been in that neighborhood on those streets for years.
Yeah,
so
I saw that.
I don't really see him as going there then to specifically pick a fight with them, but rather just keeping in what he's been doing for years.
Yeah.
And so it's
no, yeah, you're right. I saw that he was. I think it was just the sense of what was going on at the time. I think, like, I agree with you. I don't think he was there to agitate, but I think that because there was this mob there, they're not going to listen. They're not have open ears to anything that he's saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I wonder. You know, it's interesting to me that in our pursuit of being about what this, you know, what I've been communicated, what I've been told is that this is about a pursuit of justice, about a pursuit of equality, these types of things. This guy Sam was a Black dude, and for me, the big question, and Dom and AJ have heard this from me before, is the big question is dignity. Is what's actually bringing dignity to the Black community. And it seems like it's difficult to know how, if you, like, as I'm trying to navigate, what does it look like to care for people well? I have tons of friends who have great desires in their hearts, and through that great desire, they've gotten on board with the BLM movement because they desire that justice and they desire that dignity. But it seems like a number of these things that we're seeing, whether it's the riots and the burning of the Bibles, or it's the BLM rally in Charlotte, F Your Jesus, and that's been on signs elsewhere too. It seems like that there's potentially, like, almost kind of hook, line, and sinker going on, maybe a bait and switch, as far as, like, this seemed like it was about the dignity of the Black community, but it's potentially not if there's a guy who's a Black dude that's been in a neighborhood for a long time holding up a sign letting people know that Jesus loves them, and he gets egged and silly string. How is this any more about giving dignity to the Black community?
It's not, man.
Yeah.
It's not. And it never has been. It never for 1 minute was about the dignity of Black people. The only thing that's happening now is that we've had enough time and we've had enough space to objectively look at the movement. I'm fully convinced in my own mind that there was never a moment that this was about genuine justice for Black people. Even if you look at the initial founding is Soros. He's got a laundry list of leftist causes that he does. And then you look at the women founders themselves, they were 3 Black lesbians. So they don't even like men anyway. And you starting a movement to say, now, not to say that if you're a lesbian, you can't have brothers and stuff that you love, but what I'm saying is it's like of all the people who would start a movement based on the deaths of Black men, you know what I mean? Like people with that mentality would be, at least on my list. I wouldn't think that they would be the first in line to stand up for Black men. So not that they couldn't, but it just make my radar go up. And then when you look at what's happened over the past few years, like my man said, what did they do? What have they done for the Black community besides tell us a victim narrative, besides tell us that we're oppressed and really, I think it's somewhat nefarious that what they're actually doing is using the deaths of Black men as sacrificial lambs to push a socialist Marxist agenda, because they're using us straight Black men who are not even included in their platform, right? The majority of these men are straight Black heterosexual men. They're not included in their platform as far as what they see for the Black community. They take our deaths, they blow it up, they make a big deal out of it, but they don't actually do anything to change the circumstances that create that. They don't advocate for anything that would mitigate the circumstances that create that. So you don't really care. You don't really care. That's why they align with the Democrat Party. Democrat Party is always done. My bad. I keep getting phone calls. Is they keep pretending. They keep pretending like they care. They keep pretending that they're going to do something. They keep rhetoric and saying things that you want to hear, but it's nothing. You ain't do nothing. So how long are we going to pretend like we don't recognize that? How long are we going to act like we think they're still genuine? I'm done with it. Like, I've been done with it, but I just feel like there's a longing in people that want to say that, well, this part, no, throw the whole movement in the trash. I don't want nothing to do with none of them.
Right. And one of the things I believe, and this is a little controversial, but I'm going to say it. I really think that they're playing on the ignorance of Black people, or people, period. And, they really think that a lot of Black people, it's offensive, don't think for themselves, right? We're just going to be sheep and we're just going to follow along and fall in line with this narrative. And it's actually quite offensive. And if you think about it, it really is a racist organization, because it's trying to keep Black people enslaved here. Because think about it, if you watch, and I've watched and I've seen any Black person who goes against the narrative, automatically they're Uncle Tom, they're the enemy. Wait, I thought Black Lives Matter, right? I thought I could think freely. And if you really think about this, I become the enemy in some circles in my own family, because I don't support this organization. I speak out against this organization, right? Everybody has to toe the line. Everybody has to fall in line with this narrative, or they're the enemy. But Black Lives Matter, though, it makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
And they're preying on, they really are preying on, the ignorance, or let me show you your oppression. You're so oppressed. I'm not oppressed. I'm not oppressed. If any man be in Christ, he's a new creation. Old things been passed away, all things becoming new. The only thing I was oppressed to was sin. And Jesus Christ set me free from that oppression. And anything that I work for in America, I can have. I'm not oppressed.
Yeah.
But they want people to take this narrative on. Is there racist people? Yeah. Are there some conversations that need to be had? Absolutely. Are there things that I think that people need to be culturally aware of? Yeah, I absolutely do. I'm not against that. What I am against, however, is you telling me how to feel, how to think, and that I have to be a slave, to this organization or this movement or even the same. I don't support the same at all. I don't. We need Black fathers to show their kids that they matter.
Right. Yeah. And that, it's interesting to me. Dom and AJ, you guys have heard me with my theory here about fatherlessness. In neuroscience, we find that after tens of thousands of brain scans, we find that the father actually wires children for identity, so for a sense of value and mattering. And we've got over 75, almost 77%, according to the Washington Examiner, of Black children growing up without a father in the home. And so the connection I've put together there is that we have essentially 3/4 of an entire ethnic population in our nation that is literally missing the neurowiring to have a sense of mattering, have a sense of identity. And so no wonder they're crying out to matter. It just seems like they potentially are crying out to the wrong people. We need the fathers to step in and say, no, you matter. But it's interesting because, Dom, you brought up this point that, they're using Black men, right? As kind of this, like, utilizing them for their own gain. And it's interesting because when I go on the BLM website, it seems like they're against patriarchal families. They're against the nuclear family. And so it's, with like Jacob Blake, and everything that's gone down with Jacob Blake, the thing that's been attached to it, and granted, I'm not going to necessarily get into, should they have shot him or should they have not, right? I'm not a police officer. I have police officers that have broken it down to me as to why things went the way they did. But just, I've noticed that when they tout what happened with Jacob Blake, they go, he was a devoted father of X, right? And they push forward this, like, he was a dad. And yet I'm confused because it seems like the BLM website is that they're not for patriarchal families. So, I mean, I'm trying to just figure this out and go, does that mean, I guess all these guys who are dads that have been, these different guys who have been gunned down, why would that be a problem to them if they're not for dads being in the home and not for patriarchal or nuclear family?
It's not a problem for them. It's not. It's their bread and butter. It's their bread and butter. This is what they need to happen, because the people that they advocate for, the trans community and things like that, and it's all anti-God, it's all anti-family. Man, they hate us, bro. They hate us.
Josh, I know, you and I have known each other for a long time. We're just kind of reconnecting after a lot of years, but I've noticed that, like, on your posts and on your Facebook and your feed and stuff, being a father's incredibly important to you.
Absolutely.
And in fact, that's one of the things that I noticed when I was scanning through, like, hey, what's Josh up to these days? I noticed your wife just kept saying over and over and over again, he's such a good dad. He's such a good dad. And I love that. And that's actually one of the things that helps me respect a dude is, like, is he a good dad? Right. So, I was told your kids are your credentials, and so, what do we do with, I hear your heart in trying to support your friends who are Black or people of color. And I love that. And I don't want to ever disparage that because I think it's super necessary. I'm in the same boat. But what do we do with a movement and an organization that essentially leaves the idea of fatherlessness out of the conversation, but also try to support our friends here who want to be for that organization when being a father is so important to us?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think there's times, like, so for example, a conversation I was having recently with people about this exact thing was, when they're talking about, hey, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with this, and they're talking, and I was like, well, hey, kind of directing them more towards the organization versus the movement. But I think Dom and, AJ bring up really good points, that's like, even with some of that, like if I don't agree with something, I don't always have to tell them my a paragraph of why I don't agree what they believe in and what they're posting about. Sometimes it's like, hey, they're upset, they're angry, they're emotional. So like, I'm going to let them vent. And just like any of our friends or families, right, or our wives or whoever that may be, sometimes people want to vent and they're going to say things they don't really necessarily mean, or that if they thought later, like, I don't really mean that. It's not really what I'm all about. Let them get that off their chest. I'm talking mostly specifically about like our friends and family, people we care about. Let them vent, let them get it off their chest, and then be there for them. Like the people that I know, like even if you look online, it's from like my best friend is a Nigerian guy, amazing father, amazing man of God. And if you saw his post, you saw my post, like, well, there's no way these guys can be friends. You know what I mean? Just looking off of like what Facebook might say. But then like, yeah, when we're together, we're connected, we're brothers, And so I think that like spending quality time with people, not only, I mean, obviously with this pandemic, it makes it harder for a lot of people. Some people are concerned about that, so they're not as engaging as much with people. When you can, engage in person with people, I think a lot of this kind of, I say crap, a lot of this stuff just melts away, and you can really focus on like loving each other, loving people, whether you're serving them or just spending time with them. So I think that's what I would say for sure. I think there are organizations out there to support. I know, and I was actually talking to someone about this too, because I actually just volunteered this weekend with NAACP in Portland, the Portland chapter here. And the cool thing is a lot of people that I connected with there, almost all of, not all of them, but the few that I talked to were believers or brought up Christ or brought up God or brought up their church in some form or fashion, like while we were serving people. I was worried when I was serving to like say God bless you to people that we were helping. It's like, am I going to get in trouble for this? Am I going to get reprimanded or told to knock that off? But like, they seemed a lot more supportive of that. Whereas like, Don mentioned like BLM, the organization, there's no way I could support or like, be a part of that organization. But there are other organizations out there that are on the ground doing things like delivering food or helping people, get registered to vote or whatever the case may be, in the communities as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. One of those organizations that's I've been talking to a number of times over the last couple of weeks is an organization called Blexit. And I don't know if you've heard of them, but Candace Owens started it, but she's pretty hands off now. It's pretty locally run as far as state chapters go. But some of their state chapters, they've been starting things like after school mentoring programs for Black communities. They've been doing filling backpacks and Blexit. All the money that's been donated to Blexit has been given to things like filling backpacks with food and with school supplies for children in Black communities. They've been doing all sorts of they'll clean up after the rioting, and they'll go in there and they'll clean up afterwards and they'll restore the community.
That's awesome.
And so that's another organization that it's like, man, something to get behind, that they're pro fathers. They're for Black men taking responsibility and of their children and being good fathers. They're for the nuclear family. They're for people taking responsibility and having, a sense of independence. And not necessarily being relying on handouts or the government for everything they need. They're for partnering with churches and the unity of helping the church get plugged into helping this communities that are really suffering. And so that's another one of those organizations that's really important. Real quick, in our last kind of 15 minutes here, so everything that went down with Jacob Blake, it's anytime someone is shot or killed, which, Jacob Blake, is currently living still, which is good. It's any kind of that is difficult. Josh, you were in the military, and we really appreciate your service, by the way. But anytime you have to be involved in any kind of combat, I know from my own brother who is also in the military, having to enact violence is not something that you ever want to do. It's not something that you enjoy doing. It's not something that we are saying, hey, this is a great thing to do. But one of the things that's been coming up for me with the situation with Jacob Blake is his aunt took to, I think it was Twitter, speaking out, or not his aunt, the aunt of the young lady who was raped by Jacob Blake took to Twitter, and she said this. She said, "You know how hard it is right now for my niece to see her rapist being lauded as a hero. The biggest names in the NBA asking for justice for her rapist, and not a word about her or the pain he put her through." And it's been interesting because I've had Christian friends who have put up, Jacob Blake's name and basically brought up the idea of Imago Dei. And I think that's such an important thing to be talking about. AJ, you brought this up earlier, that we're all made in the image of God. And so that's where that dignity comes into play. At what point, though, it seems like with almost every single one of these people that has been kind of taken and put up on a pedestal as a martyr almost, it seems like they've perpetrated against the image of God in other people. And so, like, for instance, Jacob Blake had a warrant out for 3 months for his arrest because of sexual assault against this young lady. And then the day that the police were there, he had actually sexually assaulted her again, and with a child in the room, according to the sources I have. At what point does someone essentially kind of forfeit our concern for their Imago Dei because they have perpetrated against somebody else's Imago Dei? Does that question make sense? Dom, go for it.
If this same scenario happened in like maybe 2007, it would not even be controversial. Like what's happening, and this is why I'm so against keep repeating this Black Lives Matter phrase, because we're perpetuating the ideology when we do that. And it's forcing us to change our thinking. This is not a complicated story at all. It's nothing even really controversial about it. It's just that the climate that we're in right now is trying to pigeonhole our thinking into racializing everything and sensationalizing everything. If you just dismiss the races, let's pretend like we don't know the races of anybody. The story is a man was sexually assaulting a woman. The police were called. He resisted arrest, and they shot him as he was trying to go into his car. That's actually the story. But now when you contextualize it with the racial narratives and the Black Lives Matter narrative and all these things, now all of a sudden it somehow becomes controversial. No, it's not complicated. He was a criminal. He was in the act of a crime when he was shot. And that's why he was shot, is because he resisted arrest, like a lot of these dudes. And, even going back to the concept of fatherlessness, I heard somebody say the other day, which I thought was a good point, is a lot of these men that don't, and I don't know if Jacob Blake had a father or not, but if I had to guess, or he's at least from a culture of disrespect, obviously because he wasn't complying. But at the end of the day, like, a lot of these people, they don't submit to authority. They don't respect authority. They don't treat police with the proper authority. They don't listen. They don't obey. Like, you got 3 cops pulling guns on you, telling you to stop, and you just gonna keep walking. And then when you get shot, we supposed to look at you like you some kind of victim. Like, no, first you either an idiot or you a crook, one or the other. Like, and I'm so tired of, because when we try to treat Black people with these kid gloves, like we don't have the ability to be reasonable or to set our emotions aside and just be rational people. That's racist to me. Like, I don't need you to treat Black people like we don't have the cognitive ability to know right and wrong and good and bad, and when something is stupid, or like, we're not helpless animals that just react emotionally and have no sense of right and wrong or what we're doing. Like, no, he's a rapist. He's a criminal. He had active warrants. It ain't like he turned his life around and was in church and something. Nah, he was in the act of committing a crime. They was trying to arrest him. He didn't want to get arrested, so he got shot. And he's not dead. So I
I saw a few people that posted like, why didn't they just handcuff him? And I'm like, you do understand what resisting arrest is, right? Like,
Right. Right.
sorry.
You saw like, I had somebody on my comment, well, they should have just arrested him. What do you think he was trying to do? Arrest him. He didn't want to get arrested. So what you gonna do? He got shot. It's his own fault. If he didn't want to get shot, he should have just let him cuff him, put him in a car. Like, come on, man. If they wanted to shoot you, they wouldn't have let you walk around the car. They had ample opportunities to shoot him. And that's like I said, a lot of these cases, and I'm not gonna play that game. So people could play that game like, oh well, black people have to be my bad, systematic, this and that, but I'm not playing that game. No, you're a responsible adult, or at least you should be, and to me, that's justice. You raped a girl and you try to get away and they shot you. I'm glad they shot him because now he can't rape nobody else because he's paralyzed. I mean, that's really how I feel. It's the consequences of his own actions. I'm not happy about it, but in my view, that's justice. She never gonna get raped again by him at least, and he off the streets, whatever. I don't have no sympathy for him. I really don't.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it, Dom. Josh.
Yeah, he brought up a good point. I think, well, to your specific question, I don't think there's ever a point where their Imago Dei like is invalid or disappears. But kind of to Dom's point, justice was served, and so I think you can have both. You can say, hey, this is a child of God, even if they're on the death, in the death row, like about the death penalty. Your heart could break for this soul that, just what he did, what the crimes he committed, especially if they're severe enough to warrant that, whether it's, premeditated murder or in this case, rape. I think rape is just as bad or maybe sometimes worse, but that person has to live with that the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Doing that to somebody, and then if you do end up, if our society says, hey, this person, their life needs to now be taken, I don't think that negates their Imago Dei. I just think that they've lost their life. That doesn't mean that they're not any less a human or like in the image of God. Just unfortunately, sin is in this world, as AJ mentioned, and sometimes people give into that and aren't free of that. They're slaves to that sin. So to the end of that specific question, that's what I would say for sure.
And
I think so.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say that. Sorry, I was just going to say that. But to Dom's point, I think one of the biggest problems is why you have people on both sides. Because Dom's 100% correct. Even if race being involved, I don't think, like you said, it doesn't matter. The problem is that what you and I talked about before the call started was that if the truth isn't being put out there, what all these NBA players, NFL players, what people around the country are up in arms about with Jacob Blake is not a fact of like the facts. It's what they've been told is the facts, and what they were only the little bit of what they heard, which was this guy was stopped the fight between two women, was getting in his car where his kids were trying to drive away peacefully, and these cops ran up and shot this guy in the back. And it's like that. If you see that, if you're not up in arms about that and you don't want to defund the police, then you're a monster.
Right.
For real. The problem is that's not what happened. That's not the truth of what happened. It's like, but if you don't, so you have that come out and the people get, flared up, a ton of emotions. I think AJ was talking earlier about like, disrespecting black people by saying, hey, they have to have this group think, or they have to think this certain way, or they're trying to make them slaves of the mind. I think the way that they try to do that is through emotions. It's all emotions based. So like, cause like I was pissed off when this happened. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. There's no way this happened. I was like angry. And then I started looking into seeing what's going on and looking for more sources. And I'm like, oh wait, yes, this guy has a background. Okay. His background doesn't mean he deserved to get killed. Is that my first step? And then I'm like, all right, what was going on in the situation? Oh, he really wasn't breaking up a fight. He's actually, the woman that was there, he was calling the police against him to like have him removed. And you start hearing all these different things coming out. And on both sides, you hear lies. So it's trying to find the truth is what matters. And then Dom speaks to it. Like now that we've gotten more of the information, it's like, oh, yeah, it was a good thing. It was justice that was served is what happened.
He's a scumbag.
Yeah.
Dom doesn't play around. It's good. AJ,
love him.
Yeah.
Right? We gotta love him. Christ called us to love him, but I don't have to lie about who this person was,
Sure. And I think, Josh, it's interesting you brought up, and I'm still working on honing how I ask questions because I realize that like what's here doesn't get to
you're
here
good.
sometimes.
You're okay.
it's not that somebody loses their Imago Dei, but at what point do we prioritize essentially like, okay, you forfeited us prioritizing your Imago Dei because you went and you raped a girl, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so like at a certain point, like, you know, and this, I mean, this even goes back to like Old Testament type stuff where essentially like if somebody goes and murders or perpetrates like a assault against someone else, they forfeit essentially their right and their life. And the purpose of that though was that so the Imago Dei would be kept sacred. Because if there's never any kind of sense of like, if you go and perpetrate this, there's no consequence, then all of a sudden life is not sacred anymore. And
Yeah.
I think that's such a huge aspect to what's going on right now. We see it whether it's violence, and we look at like and this is for me coming from a place of having friends who are Black, wanting the best for them, but like Black on Black crime is so heartbreaking to me because they've literally created a culture in which their music, their media, their movies, everything that's taught in some of these communities is that, you know, we are like, we need to essentially be like animals, or like these people who to denigrate each other and come after each other and kill each other. And it's so sad to me because it's like life is not sacred anymore. Or you look at abortion, like there is 1,800 babies who are being aborted today. So if we think about that, we think about this idea that, Josh, you and I, we went to Philomath, right? And Philomath is about the size of 5,000 or 6,000 people. So in 3 days, Philomath would be wiped out. That's what we're talking about. An entire city wiped out in 3 days by the abortions happening. And what's crazy is that 13% of our population in this nation is Black, but Black abortions make up a huge part of that number. They're literally aborting more babies in New York than they are birthing in the Black community. And it's so sad to me that life is not sacred anymore. And so at what point does someone essentially disqualify that we need to prioritize their life as sacred because they have taken away the sacredness of somebody else's life, and therefore those who are in governing authority need to step in and say, hey, we need to protect people, we need to protect life, we need to protect things that are sacred, like a woman not being raped, right? Does that clarify what I was talking about a little bit better?
No, absolutely. So I think that the what I said, I kind of spoke to that. There is a point where obviously like somebody they need to, as a society, we've decided that they deserve to lose their life for certain crimes they commit. I think we obviously, it's getting degraded. And to your point, like the people that are, you know, kill multiple people with cold blood or emotions or whatever, and they get life in prison, or somebody murders somebody rapes, they get, you know, committed for rape, and they get a few months, so they get a year maybe in jail. So yeah, it's heartbreaking for sure. I think you're right. I think part of the devil's plan, you know, it's with sin, is to take away that Imago Dei, so life don't matter that much. And you talk to all those points, like abortion, you talk about women being raped, you talk about people being killed. And I think the biggest thing that I've seen, I'm trying to see what's out there in the world and like why are things happening the way they are. And I try not to. I have to keep myself away from reading comments on anything. And the one thing the thread that I see, and then you guys can tell me what you think on this, but like the thread that I see is like, I think the devil's like his goal right now, and what he's trying to do is go after empathy. If you take away empathy, then you have people that, like what happened in Kenosha, people are cheering that like this kid killed these people, right? You'd see the death of the guy, the Patriot Prayer guy who died in Portland. I think he did die. So you have this stuff that happens there, and people are cheering on both sides. And like you mentioned about Andy and about myself, like when you've actually been in that situation, you realize like, oh, like even though like, I mean, I need to take this life to protect myself and protect others, there's nothing to cheer about when it comes to like taking a life or somebody losing their life. And so like, to me, it's like what I see, and I see it in the church too. I see that like it's just lack of empathy. If you don't have empathy, you don't really care about anybody that doesn't look like you, sound like you, or whatever that you care about. If you don't care about it, then it doesn't matter. And that could be up to somebody losing their life. And that's scary. I think it's a good litmus test. I think what's going on right now this last week is a litmus test of where America's at, and it's really scary.
Yeah. AJ, I'm going to let you have the last word here. I'm going to jump in one more time real quick. Josh, you brought up empathy. So I do pastoral counseling, and that's one of the things, I'm a high empathy dude. And so I'm constantly sitting with people and experiencing what they're feeling. But one thing that's really interesting is that when people are experiencing false guilt and false shame, there's no cure for it. There's nothing they can do. There's no amends to make. There's nothing they can process that will make that false guilt go away. What we have to do is we have to identify it, and we have to pull it apart from real guilt and from real shame. And it's amazing because the current movement that's going on right now, it's promoting what sounds like empathy, but I believe what people are being taken by is what I would say is false guilt and false shame. That as a white guy, I need to somehow feel a bunch of shame and a bunch of guilt for a bunch of things that I didn't do, but because I'm white, I therefore need to take it on. And the truth is that the white people are essentially are getting spun up into this crazy mess because they don't know what to do with this false guilt and false shame, because no amends will ever make it right because it's false. And so I have to sit here with clients, and when they're going, there's things that absolutely they've done wrong, but then there's other things that they've taken on that's false. I have to help them pull that apart, because then they never actually correct what's wrong. They just stay in this cycle. And we've done that on a mass scale. And I think separating false guilt and false shame from empathy, that those are different things, that empathy absolutely is needed, but to not parade empathy as false guilt and false shame, which is, I think, is happening kind of on a societal level right now.
Amen.
AJ, go for it.
I don't have much. I want to go back to the shooting. Someone asked me about this, and I just had to be honest. I said I probably would have shot him too. We think it's true. No one thinks about the police officers in this situation. Yeah. How would you react in that situation? It's easy to sit here and judge someone based off an action, and you're not in the situation. So if he was reaching for something, it's my life or his. And getting people to think about that, and that sounded comical and things like that, but I was able to actually get people to rethink. At that point they were in survival mode. You can't react a certain way. I'll just give a brief story, and I don't know if I shared this before, but I remember I was in the car with my siblings, and we were riding on the way to a church event, and this lady decided to call the police. We passed her, and she decided to call the police. I don't know why, and said we pulled a gun on her. So about 10 miles later, there was about 10 officers with guns who showed up, and their guns were pulled on us, right? And three of my siblings were in the car, and they told us to put our hands out the window. So me, my brother, one of my brothers, and my sisters did. My other brother, who did not grow up with us, so he was with his mom because he was our half brother. My dad had him out of wedlock, and he wouldn't do it. And we're sitting there coaching him like, this is gonna go really bad. You need to comply, And they're giving warning after warning after warning. Finally, I yelled at him, get your hand out the window now. He did, right? It was all about complying with what is being asked of you. But right there in that moment, looking back at it, I can see that it was lack of discipline in his life, lack of respect for authority, right? In his life. He didn't have what we had coming up. He didn't come and live with us till he was 12 years old. You know, he missed a lot of that developing stages. And what you talk about is that identity, that father speaking into him. And so it showed me very clearly, you know, the lack of respect and the lack of regard. But because we were able to comply with that, we didn't get shot. You know, there was a conversation. It opened up a conversation about race and all of these things. And I believe the lady was racist and she was prejudiced, and we were able to talk about those things. But it's all about, you know, what we're all saying. It's all about respect for one another, love for one another. And I think that has really gotten lost. And I think it's really gotten lost among believers. You know, I preached a message last Sunday. I said, we need a love revival, because the love of many, that's what we're seeing. Where lawlessness abound, the love of many has been waxed cold, right? And that's what we're seeing right now. And we have to, and Josh, I would just encourage you in supporting that. You know, when you have an opportunity, speak truth, because only truth sets people free. You know, if it's not making sense, if it's not, we can't allow our friends and family members to be enslaved and indoctrinated with this stuff that ultimately does not produce fruit. It does not produce fruit. It keeps us bound. It keeps us bound to hatred. It keeps us bound to all of these things that they're trying to indoctrinate us with. I'm gonna stop because I'm gonna preach. But all of these things. So the best thing I could do for the people around me, they didn't see it. I had to sit them down and say, let's walk through this, right? And now they're experiencing the freedom that I'm seeing. You know, everybody's woke but not awake.
Sleepwalking.
Sleepwalking.
So, anyways, I'm done.
No, I appreciate that.
I want to add. Let me add one thing to that, because that's right on the sentiment that I wanted to hit on, because I know we about to wrap up. But I especially want to say this to you and Josh as white men, as white brothers in Christ, because we're all believers. There is a phenomenon in the church right now where I feel like a lot of people in the church feel like we can solve people's heart issues by cultural means. And what's happening is we're starting to compromise on scripture to appeal to people in the culture. Do not do that. I see so many people, believers, well-intentioned, fighting the temptation to appeal to people culturally to alleviate. But once you start to capitulate, they're never going to let you stop. You're going to have to keep compromising yourself. We as men especially, and especially you guys on the other side of the race issue as white men looking into a Black Lives Matter incident from an outsider's perspective, your best weapon is the same weapon that I use, the same weapon that all of us use. As men, we stand on biblical truth and principle. And anything that tries to force us to compromise on that, where we can't speak the gospel truthfully and boldly and accurately within the appropriate context, that's a red flag for us right there, that we cannot proceed in this way. Anything that's telling us that Christ is not God and that Christ is not the way, anything that's making us compromise on our principles given to us by our holy God, the creator of all things, anything that's turning us away from that, it ain't for us. And it's going to really come down to guys like you, white people, non-Black people that are not afraid of being called racist for telling the truth, that are not afraid of getting a side eye, or are not afraid, because that fear that you have is going to be used against you. So you can't tell the truth because you're going to be portrayed as a racist. You can't tell the truth. And we just have to let go, because to some degree, it's a little bit of selfishness that we want to be perceived a certain way by others. And we're willing to compromise on truth so that we can have the perception, or so that others can have the perception of us that we want them to have. But that's not up to us. You know what I mean? We need to honor God above everything else and anyone else. So anything that's compromised in that, that needs to be the line that we're drawing. We need to encourage each other in that. So, you know, any true believer in Christ is going to know the truth. We know the voice of God. We know that what's fair, right? A false balance is abomination to God. We know what's true. We know what's fair. We can discern objectivity, and we can discern sincerity, hypocrisy. That's the gifts of the Spirit. So if I see you as a white man telling the truth, and I'm a true believer myself, I'm not going to condemn you for it. So a lot of this contention is really highlighting the hypocrisy in people's hearts, and we need to be able to discern that. We don't want to walk along with them. We want to be able to discern that and correct each other. And that goes for our own judgment of ourselves as well. Like, I didn't like that they started hailing the dude Kyle Rittenhouse as like some kind of hero. Like, how's he a hero? Like, he was in an unfortunate situation and he made it out alive, but people died. Like, what's heroic about that? But that's the other side of them trying to perpetuate a narrative and people feeling vindicated because there's animosity towards the other side. So we have to walk that center line, that Christ turned not to the right hand nor to the left. Remove thy foot from evil. That's in Proverbs. We walk the narrow gate. So I just want to encourage y'all in that way, you know, in your day-to-day life. Don't be afraid of the mob. Don't throw up the black power fist like that girl surrounded by all them people and they trying to make her put up the, like, come on, man. And we have to be bold and courageous, especially as men, because people are going to look to us. And when they see you capitulate, Matt, as a pastor, Josh, your friends, your black friends that look up to you as a strong man of moral, man of God, and they see you capitulate to the mob, that's sending a signal to everybody like, okay, well, maybe this is right. Nah, we stand on God's word. We stand on the truth, and that's it. That's it.
Yeah, appreciate that, brother.
That's good.
Appreciate that a lot. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to try to navigate right now. I'm someone who's not a combative person. I'm somebody who likes to help things become whole again rather than create divides. But that, I'll tell you what, it's so funny because on these videos, you experience me a little bit differently probably than if you were to hear one of my sermons. Because especially when it comes to the church, I don't really kid glove it at all. Because I feel like there's an expectation for believers that we have to uphold. My goal with these videos is to essentially ask as kind of almost somewhat neutral questions and let people like you guys speak into them. And then get it out there for all of my Pacific Northwest friends to see, because up here in the PNW, we have a bit of a hard time getting voices like yours heard. So, you know, I appreciate that and I take it to heart, brother. And I appreciate all of you giving the time today. So you guys are, I appreciate you and what you're each doing in your different spheres of influence. So thanks for jumping on here.
Absolutely, brother. Love you guys, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dom's getting a call again, brother. He just won't.
It's a popular man.
Yeah.
Kill him.